My sister brought her friends to humiliate me at work. I owned the entire building. What if the people closest to you, the ones you trusted the most, were the ones who hurt you the deepest? Hey, my name is Elizabeth. It's strange how one moment can change everything. How something so small can feel like a punch to the gut. One that knocks the wind out of you and leaves you gasping for air. I never thought it would happen like this. Not with her. Not from my own sister. It all began with an ordinary day at work. I was working a double shift at a popular downtown restaurant, juggling orders, keeping my composure, and making sure the guests were happy. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid the bills, and truthfully, I didn't mind it. I took pride in what I did. My job wasn't just about serving food, it was about making people feel welcome, creating an experience for them. And yet, when my sister Samantha walked in with her friends, my world came to a crashing halt. She wasn't alone. She had brought her entire circle with her, the kind of people who wouldn't even acknowledge my existence outside of the restaurant. They were the types who saw my job as beneath them, as a temporary stop in my life until I found something better. I had always put on a smile when they came in, trying to maintain my professionalism. But that day was different. That day, Samantha's friends didn't just sit down and order. They made it their mission to embarrass me. As soon as I approached their table to take their drink orders, I saw the smug looks on their faces. One of her friends, a man I'd never met, loudly asked, "So, do you really think you'll make it out of here and do something with your life?" His voice was dripping with mockery, and the others around the table snickered. My sister didn't say a word. She just sat there, her eyes avoiding mine. The blood rushed to my face. I stood there, frozen. I didn't know how to respond. I could feel the weight of their judgment pressing down on me, could almost hear the whispers of, "This is all you'll ever be, just a waitress?" But it wasn't just the strangers. It was her, my sister, the one person who should have supported me, who should have had my back. She was the one who brought them in, who let them make me feel smaller than I already did. I wanted to walk away. I wanted to disappear. But I couldn't. I had to keep my composure. Just breathe. Just breathe. I kept telling myself. So, I forced a smile, ignored the lump in my throat, and took their orders. The worst part, my sister didn't even look up from her menu. She acted as though this was just another night, another dinner with her friends. The betrayal stung deeper than the laughter that echoed in the room. This wasn't the first time Samantha had treated me like this, but it was the first time it felt so deliberate, so cruel. As I walked away from the table, I felt my chest tighten, my stomach churn. Every step felt heavier than the last. I had always defended her to others, brushed off the little ways she made me feel insignificant, but this was different. This wasn't just a moment of embarrassment. This was a betrayal from someone I had loved and trusted my entire life, and that was the moment. The moment I realized I couldn't keep living this way, letting people walk all over me. I couldn't continue to let their judgments, their words, define who I was. Will I choose to stay silent, or will I take control of my own story? The decision seemed monumental, but in the silence of the restaurant, I knew I had a choice to make. I could keep enduring the humiliation, keep pretending that I didn't care what people thought of me, or I could finally do something about it. For the first time in my life, I chose myself. I chose not to be the person who silently accepted the cruelty of others. But the question that still lingered was this: how? The days that followed the incident at the restaurant felt like a blur. I couldn't shake the weight of what had happened, couldn't stop thinking about how my sister, the person who should have been my ally, had let me endure the humiliation in front of her friends. I kept replaying the moment in my head, trying to make sense of it. How had it come to this? How had I ended up here, in this place of emotional fragility? I thought back to our childhood, to the years I had spent trying to win her approval, trying to prove that I was worth something. Samantha was always the star, smart, beautiful, and effortlessly successful, and there I was, always in her shadow, always the one who wasn't quite enough. I had tried to be everything she wanted, but it was never enough. I was the quiet one, the one who stayed in the background, always trying to fit into her world. But the more I tried, the more I felt like I was losing myself. She had always been quick to point out my flaws, to remind me of the ways I fell short of her expectations. It wasn't just the cruel words she said in front of her friends. It was the smaller moments, the dismissive comments about my job, the way she acted as though she couldn't be bothered with someone like me. I had spent my life trying to make her proud, but no matter how much I achieved, it never seemed to matter. Every small success was met with indifference. Every dream I had was brushed aside. There were countless times when she would subtly belittle me, comments about my appearance, my choices, the way I lived my life. I had convinced myself it was just her way, that she didn't mean to hurt me, that maybe I was just being sensitive. But deep down, I knew the truth. She didn't see me as her equal. She saw me as a burden, a reminder of the things in her life that weren't perfect. And now, after all these years, after all the sacrifices I had made to be there for her, to support her, she had brought her friends to watch me be humiliated. It was as if my worth was nothing more than a punchline in their eyes, a joke they could laugh at without ever feeling the consequences of their actions. The betrayal hurt. But what hurt even more was the realization that I had allowed it to happen. I had allowed her to treat me like this, allowed myself to believe that I wasn't worthy of respect. I had been so desperate for her approval that I had allowed her to control my sense of self-worth. As I sat in my small apartment, replaying the events over and over in my head, I asked myself, why did I let it go on for so long? Why had I let her and others walk all over me? It wasn't just the incident at the restaurant. It was the culmination of years of being unseen, of being made to feel like I wasn't enough. The small betrayals, the ignored feelings, the constant dismissal, they had piled up over time, and I had kept pushing them down, pretending they didn't matter. But they did matter. I had spent so long being afraid of confrontation, afraid of losing the people in my life who mattered, but I had never stopped to consider whether those people were really worth keeping. Did I deserve to be treated this way? Did I deserve to be ignored, belittled, and rejected by the ones who were supposed to love me? The truth hit me hard. I had been carrying these wounds for far too long, pretending they didn't affect me, that I could simply move on. But they had been scarring me, little by little, changing who I was, altering how I saw myself. And now, I realized that I had to confront those wounds if I ever hoped to heal. Can I confront the hidden wounds, or will they remain buried forever? The answer was clear. I couldn't keep running from them. I couldn't keep hiding behind the facade of strength I had built up over the years. I needed to face them head on. I needed to confront the emotional scars that had been festering for so long. And I needed to do it for myself. I was done being the person who allowed others to dictate how I felt about myself. I was done letting them control my happiness. Had been walking through life with invisible chains, and now it was time to break free. But breaking free meant confronting the painful truth about myself, about who I had allowed myself to become. The betrayal had opened my eyes to the truth. It wasn't just about my sister, it was about me. It was about the way I had allowed others to define my worth. The way I had believed their criticisms over my own self-perception. And now, it was time to take back control. I didn't know what that would look like or how I would do it, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let the past continue to haunt me. I wasn't going to stay stuck in the emotional scars anymore. I was going to confront them, heal from them, and move forward as a stronger, more empowered version of myself. And maybe, just maybe, I would finally stop looking to others for validation. Maybe I would finally learn to value myself for who I was, not for who they wanted me to be. The moment of realization hit me harder than I expected. I had spent so long pretending to be someone I wasn't, bending over backward to meet the expectations of people who never really saw me for who I was. But now, something was different. The scales had fallen from my eyes. I could no longer ignore the pain, the small betrayals, the emotional scars that had slowly worn me down. It was time to take action. I stood in front of the mirror, looking at my reflection with new eyes. I wasn't the same person who had walked into that restaurant months ago. The woman who had been ashamed of her job, of her choices, had been replaced by someone who had seen the truth, who had confronted the wounds and understood that they didn't have to define me. I wasn't weak because of them. I was stronger. I had spent too much time letting others tell me who I should be, letting my sister define my worth, letting the judgment of others tell me that I wasn't good enough. But the truth was, I had been good enough all along. I had been working hard, striving, and making a life for myself. And if I was going to keep going, I had to take control of my narrative, not let anyone else dictate it. I needed to do something big, something bold, something that would not only prove my worth to others, but more importantly, prove it to myself. The idea came to me slowly, creeping into my mind like a quiet whisper. I wasn't just going to let my sister's betrayal slide. I wasn't going to sweep it under the rug and let it fester into more resentment. No, I was going to rise above it. I was going to take what she had done to me and turn it into something powerful, I had worked at this restaurant for years, building up my skills and my reputation. It wasn't just a job, it was my passion, my way of showing the world that I could do more than just serve food. I was capable of so much more. But what if I could own it? What if I could take control of not just my life, but of the very place that had once made me feel small? The more I thought about it, the more it felt right. Why not? Why not take the next step, make a real change, and own something that had once been a source of shame? Why not turn the restaurant into a symbol of my empowerment? I wasn't naive. I knew it wouldn't be easy. The thought of owning a business, especially one as high-profile as the restaurant I worked at, seemed far-fetched. But then again, hadn't I been underestimated my whole life? Hadn't I been made to feel like I wasn't good enough? Like I wasn't capable of achieving something greater? Well, I wasn't going to let that stop me now. The more I researched, the more I realized it was possible. The restaurant's owner was struggling financially, and there were murmurs around town that he might be looking to sell. I had the determination, the drive, and the support of a few key people who believed in me. But what I needed now was a plan. I started writing down ideas, financial strategies, how I would raise the necessary capital, how I would approach investors. I began networking with people who could help me make this dream a reality. I reached out to banks, financial advisors, and even a few acquaintances who had experience in the restaurant industry. It was overwhelming at first, but I felt the adrenaline pushing me forward, fueling my every move. What I didn't expect was the flood of emotions that came with it. As I poured myself into my research, into the numbers and the logistics, I also found myself confronting the pain of the past. My sister's betrayal, the ridicule I had faced, the years of being invisible, it all came rushing back. But this time, I didn't run from it. I embraced it. Every rejection, every insult, every hurtful comment, they all became the fuel for my ambition. As I sat at my desk one evening, drafting yet another business proposal, I asked myself, can I find the courage to change my life, or will I hesitate when it matters most? I wasn't going to hesitate. I had already wasted too many years letting others dictate my worth. I had allowed my fear and my insecurity to hold me back. But not anymore. I picked up the phone, dialed the number of the restaurant's owner, and made the first step toward owning the business. The conversation was short, but the feeling of it lingered for hours. This was my turning point. From this moment on, there was no going back. I had made the decision. I was taking control of my future. But the hardest part was yet to come. The negotiations, the challenges, the self-doubt that would creep in, telling me I wasn't enough. But I knew something now that I hadn't known before. I was stronger than I realized. I was capable of more than I had ever given myself credit for. As I hung up the phone and looked out the window, I felt a quiet confidence settle in my chest. I didn't know how the journey would unfold, or what obstacles lay ahead. But one thing was clear. My life was about to change in ways I could never have imagined. The first few days after I decided to pursue ownership of the restaurant were a blur. It wasn't just about finding the right investors or navigating the negotiations. It was about proving to myself that I was capable of pulling this off. I spent hours planning, strategizing, and connecting with people who could help me bring my vision to life. Each call I made, each email I sent, was another step forward, another action in my quest for control. But as I moved forward, something started to weigh on me. It was more than just the financial hurdles or the sleepless nights I spent figuring out how to finance the purchase. It was the realization that this wasn't just about owning a business. It was about reclaiming my life and finally standing up for myself after years of being mistreated. I had been humiliated by my sister. But I realized something crucial. It wasn't just her. I had spent years bending to the expectations of others, allowing myself to be defined by what people thought of me. My sister's behavior was just the latest in a series of betrayals I had silently endured. Each one left a mark, each one pushed me further into the shadows of my own life. And now, I had a choice, to keep letting these moments define me, or to take them and turn them into something that would change my future. I couldn't do it alone. I needed help. The first step was reaching out to a few close friends who knew about the challenges I was facing. They were people I trusted, ones who had always believed in me when others didn't. It was them who reminded me that I had the strength to do this, that I was more than just someone who served food. I was someone with vision, with ambition, and the ability to make it happen. I spent hours refining my business plan, outlining the goals I wanted to achieve, and identifying areas where the restaurant could improve. The owner had let the place fall into disrepair, and the menu was stale. There was a lack of creative energy, a lack of innovation that kept it from thriving. I knew it was more than just turning a profit. It was about injecting passion, culture, and authenticity into the restaurant. It had the potential to become something bigger than it just needed, someone who cared enough to bring that change. But my plan wasn't just about fixing the restaurant, it was also about making sure that the people who had wronged me would understand the power of redemption. I had made the decision to confront my sister, but not in the way I initially thought. I wasn't going to scream at her or throw her betrayal in her face. Instead, I would show her the person I had become. As I thought about my sister's role in all of this, I realized that this wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming my own dignity. She had treated me as though I were less than her, as though I were a small piece of her life that she could discard without a second thought. But now, I had the power to show her that I wasn't just the person she had once belittled. I was someone capable of standing on my own 2 feet. Someone who could rise above her petty games. But how do I make her see that? How do I make her understand the depth of the change I've gone through? I couldn't force her to acknowledge the pain she had caused. I couldn't make her apologize for the years of emotional neglect. But what I could do was show her what it looked like to take control. What it looked like to rise from the ashes of humiliation and become the person I had always known I could be. As I got closer to finalizing the deal, I began to craft a letter to her, one that would explain everything. I wanted her to know that I wasn't angry, that I wasn't seeking revenge. Instead, I wanted her to understand that I had grown, that I had found strength in my pain, and that I wasn't just her little sister anymore. I was someone capable of making her own way in the world. I had become someone who refused to be defined by her cruelty. The more I worked on this letter, the more I felt my power growing. The humiliation from that night at the restaurant, the sting of her laughter, her dismissive attitude was slowly being replaced with something stronger. I wasn't the victim anymore. I wasn't the girl who just took it. I was someone who had decided to take back control. It was a strange feeling, one that I couldn't quite describe. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I had let go of that. Instead, I was determined. I had my plan in place, and I knew that nothing and no one was going to stop me from seeing it through. The final piece of the puzzle was the owner. The deal was almost done, but there were still negotiations to be made. I had been paid the ins and outs of the industry, refining my pitch, but now, it was time to go in and make my final offer. I knew it wouldn't be easy. The owner wasn't going to give up his business without a fight. But I was ready, and I knew that, no matter the outcome, I was prepared to face whatever came my way. Would I feel victorious when it's over, or will the consequences leave me feeling empty? The thought lingered in the back of my mind, but I didn't let it distract me. The truth was, I had already won. I had already taken control of my future. No matter what happened, I was no longer a victim. As I put the final touches on my plan, I couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. The pieces were falling into place. The moment of change was coming, and I was ready. The day of the final negotiation arrived. The moment that I had been working toward for weeks. The moment when everything I had planned would either come to fruition or crumble before my eyes. I had spent countless hours studying the business, learning about its financials, mapping out my vision, and making connections. I knew I wasn't just fighting for ownership of a restaurant. I was fighting for my dignity, for my right to be seen as more than just the person others had always underestimated. I arrived early at the restaurant, my heart pounding with a mix of nerves and excitement. This was the moment I would either rise or fall. I had made peace with the possibility of failure. After all, I had already made the choice to change my life. But I wasn't about to fail. Not today. As I walked through the front doors, I could almost feel the weight of the past on my shoulders. The smell of old memories of humiliation, of small betrayals lingered in the air. But now, those memories no longer held the same power over me. I wasn't the same person I had been when I walked into this place months ago. This was my territory. Now, I had earned the right to stand here. The owner, Mr. Hollingsworth, was already seated at a table in the back, a man who had once been the embodiment of power in this restaurant. But as I approached him, I couldn't help but notice the way his eyes shifted when he saw me. There was a brief moment of hesitation in his gaze. He was used to controlling everything. He wasn't used to someone like me standing in front of him, ready to take over. "Elizabeth," he greeted me, his voice smooth but tinged with the unease I'd been waiting for. He must have sensed that today was different. "I trust you've come to discuss the deal." I have, I said, keeping my voice calm, measured. But before we continue, I need to be clear about something. I took a seat across from him, my hand steady as I placed the papers in front of him. This was the moment where the years of silence, of submitting to others' expectations, would finally come to an end. I wasn't going to let anyone dictate my worth anymore. Not him, not my sister, not anyone. The terms are simple, I began. I'm offering to buy your business. But I'm not just buying a restaurant. I'm buying a legacy. I'm buying something that will define me, something I will make my own. He raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. And what makes you think you're capable of running this place? The question stung, but I refused to let it show. I had prepared for this, because I know this business better than you do. I've been here, working for you, doing everything from waiting tables to managing your kitchen. I know what it takes to make this place thrive. I know what it means to be humble, to work hard for what you have. But most importantly, I know what it means to give people a reason to respect you. I paused, allowing my words to sink in, watching him carefully. That's something you've forgotten. There it was. The confrontation I had been planning. The truth I had kept inside for so long. It wasn't just about taking over the business, it was about taking back everything I had lost in the years of being dismissed and overlooked. I wasn't just buying a building. I was claiming my power. Mr. Hollingsworth looked down at the papers, his fingers trembling slightly. I could see the wheels turning in his mind. He wasn't expecting this. He wasn't expecting me to come at him with such conviction, with such clarity. But I had finally understood my worth, and no one, not even him, was going to take that away. I can't make this decision right now, he said, his voice betraying his uncertainty. I need more time. You've had enough time, I replied, leaning forward. The offer stands. Take it or leave it, but I'm not walking away. Not this time. The silence that followed was thick. But this time, it wasn't uncomfortable. It was powerful. I knew what I was worth. I didn't need anyone else's approval to move forward. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he sighed and picked up the papers. He scanned through the offer, his expression unreadable. I'll accept your offer, he said, his voice resigned. I smiled, feeling a sense of triumph welling up inside me. This wasn't just a win for my business, it was a win for me, for everything I had overcome, the humiliation, the years of self-doubt, the betrayal from my sister, it was all worth it, because now, I was in control. I wasn't the person they had once laughed at, I was the one who had the last laugh. I'm glad we could come to an agreement, I said, standing up from the table. I'll have my lawyer contact you about the next steps. As I walked out of that restaurant, the weight on my shoulders lifted. The past, the pain, the fear, they were all behind me now. I had taken control of my life, and I was ready to see it flourish. But as I left, there was one more thing on my mind. Samantha, my sister. I hadn't seen her since the restaurant incident, and I knew that confrontation would come soon. I couldn't avoid it forever. Will I feel relieved after this, or will it leave me questioning everything? I didn't know. But what I did know was that I was no longer afraid. I had owned this moment. Now, it was time to own the future.